Welcome to this how-to on rendering in Blender Cycles. I just read a Twitter post from some guy who wrote about giving up on cycles since he only gets grainy results and grainy pictures, and he couldn't figure out how to set up cycles so he gets nice and clean results like the one you are seeing right now. So I went ahead, I quickly set up this scene here with a few Suzannes, and we have a velvet bottom plane, we have the glass Suzannes, and we have the mirror background plane with a glossy material and some roughness. And of course we have the environment texture that acts as only light in this scene as well. And as you can see, this is a pretty nice result. It's pretty clean. And also of course I added some DOF, some depth of field, and it's pure cycles. There is no compositing done at all, so this is what we are going to do. And yeah, as you can see, this is the scene I just described. We have the camera. You can see the camera limits, I enabled them, and you can see the focus is on the middle monkey here, the original monkey. And let's start from scratch. So I'm going to delete the default cube by pressing X, and I'm going to enable screencast. Screencast over here. Start display. Alright. So default scene, going to top view, going to orthographic view, and I'm going to add a plane. Scale the plane quite a lot. Going to add another plane. Side view rotated by 90. Front view, scale it up, and reposition. Actually, doesn't really matter that much. Not rotate. Grab it on Y. Something like. No, doesn't matter too much. Yeah, now I'm gonna add a few Suzannes, set them to smooth shading, and now I'm going to change to cycles render up here. This will immediately change the look of our solid view a little bit, and I'm going to start to assign materials now already quickly. So the bottom plane here, this one, is going to get a velvet material, the background glossy, and Suzanne glass. Alright, also to make Suzanne a little bit more beautiful, yeah, subsurf default settings will do. Yeah, reposition Suzanne a little bit on the Z-axis, and maybe rotate her like this. That will do. So we're going to top, and I'm going to duplicate Suzanne. Where is our background? There. So I'm going to duplicate Suzanne like a couple of times. And rotate them around a bit. So they look at each other. And now I'm going to reposition the camera real quickly. Also, you notice I'm in orthographic view now, but when I look through the camera, I'm always in perspective mode. Well, at least when the camera is set to perspective. So I want to have my camera like this, I guess. Maybe like this. And I'm going to press Ctrl, Alt, and 0, which will reposition my camera here. Maybe zoom out a little bit so we get a glimpse of every monkey. And then I move this Suzanne a little bit more into the middle of the other monkeys, and rotate her a little bit on the Z-axis to my direction. Alright, so this is going to be our basic cycle scene. So we start with the cycle settings now, and the most important thing for cycles, the settings here, it's the integrator. If you want to get a nice and clean result, in the end you will have to play a lot with the integrator settings. And it also depends on your machine, of course, what you can do and how long it will take. And also important to know for cycles is when we go into the preferences over here, or we just press Control Alt U, we go to System, to the System tab, and we have the compute devices down here. At the default is CPU, that will always work, and if you have a NVIDIA GeForce card like me, you can use CUDA if you have a build that supports the CUDAs. And I will usually use this. But if you don't have a GeForce and you have a Radeon ATI card, then most likely only OpenCL will work for you, and you will not be able to see textures in OpenCL mode. It's still useful for the render preview, but you will have to do your final render with the CPU mode. So I'm going to choose CUDA over here, close this, and this gives me new options here. I'm going to choose experimental GPU compute because that works best on my machine, and I'm going to focus back on the integrator settings now. So for some reason it didn't revert to the default presets here when I loaded the factory settings at the beginning, but never mind. So you would have the default factory settings here now if you start a fresh Blender process and you change it to cycles. And it's direct light now here for me, and you only have those three presets for now: direct light, full global illumination, and limited global illumination. And what they do we will see in a moment. So my render samples for the preview are at 10 now. This is really low. 100 would still be too low to have a final result. And the picture you saw at the beginning, the one I rendered in 5 minutes, I put those on 1000, and this was actually too much. I didn't need that much to have a clean result as clean as the one you saw at the beginning, but yeah, I just liked to have the 1000. It took only 5 minutes, so why not go up to 1000 then? Sometimes, even though it's not always the higher the value the better, sometimes when I played around with this, and I went to something higher than, much higher than I actually needed, so I could see at 1000 samples it was a nice clean result already, but I let it run for like 2500 then, and I started to see fireflies in different locations of my picture, and the more it rendered, the more fireflies would develop, even though the part of the picture where the firefly would appear wasn't really unclear or anything. I don't really know why that happened actually, but yeah, it doesn't really, you don't really need more than you need actually. So if you see the picture is pretty clear at like 600 or 700 or something like that, you should not really need to use more than that. Like I saw it was pretty decent at like 700, 800, and I just put it up to 1000 to have a nice round value, and left it at that. So yeah, for the preview I'm gonna leave it at 10. Usually I put that on 100 or on 0, but for the sake of recording this, I'm gonna leave it at 10. So it's rendering now, and here we go with 10 samples. And if I go to the background plane now here, so I select the one in the background, we go to the options. This is the glossy material, and I want to add some roughness to this. So if I would change the value to 1, it would go completely nuts. If I change it to 0.1, you can see our camera is not getting the direct reflection anymore, so we don't have the immediate fireflies there, but the picture looks a lot more grainy. And yeah, usually I don't go higher with this than 0.2 for the sake of render time. And you can see we have fireflies now developing in other spots in the scene. A few fireflies of course are always okay, but let's change this down to something really low, like 0.01, and you can see we have still a good amount of reflectiveness here, and our light source actually displays as kind of a sun now, if if you want. And it also, what it does, due to the reflection of the light source, that the light goes from the light source to our mirror object, the plane in the background, and from there it gets reflected and falls down onto our velvet floor object, and you can already see a lot of fireflies all over there. So if I want to change this, I have obviously I have to change the settings on my light either, or reposition my light so this doesn't happen, or change my lighting for the scene completely in general. Or I could change the roughness here to a higher value again, which would give me more render time and less fireflies, immediate fireflies. At least there would probably still be quite a few fireflies if I let this render long enough. And to get rid of the graininess in this picture now, at 10 samples, we would have to let it render for a lot longer than this to get a clean result. So in this case, so this is if we just use one lamp. Now we could add more lamps and play a lot with the lighting, but in general, just to point this out, not to talk too long on this point, lighting is very important in cycles, and you always have to be aware of the stuff that reflects your light, where your light source is, and if you don't want to have tons of fireflies and super grainy results. And yeah, obviously the materials that reflect the light and are also very important, and the roughness value has a huge impact, as you can see, and you have sensitive values like that, like the IOR. So the higher the IOR, the more gets reflected here, the more dense is the reflection. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but yeah, if I change this down, the monkeys will get a lot more transparent, but the render time will decrease. If I would change this down all the way to 1, the monkey would pretty much be completely transparent, I guess. But yeah, you always want to have it a little bit higher than 1, and if you want to have realistic results, like you want to emulate or simulate water, you would change this to 1.33, and this would also impact your render time, of course, and it would render longer than if you would have it on 1.15 like I do now. And of course also when you change those presets here, so I change it now to GGX, this will also impact your render time and the overall quality of your picture, and you can see we have new fireflies developing in the monkey heads now, or in this monkey head and here on the floor, and this is just because I changed the default to GGX. If I change it back, you can see the distribution of the fireflies is different, and it's not that horrible anymore. If I change this to sharp, you can see we also have a slightly different result. We have some more fireflies there in the background now, I guess, and here is some fireflies in the monkeys. Nothing on the velvet floor right now, but Beckmann, the default, seems actually to work quite decent. Well, actually sharp seems to work quite decent as well. Yeah, so this is just the basic example, and it's already taking way too long, so I'm going back to solid view mode for now, and well, this was actually quite horrible with the lighting. I'm going to delete the light here now, going back to camera view, and I'm going to the world settings, and I'm going to change this to environment texture, and I'm going to load in some random environment texture from this HDR folder here. The one that I used before, I guess it was this one. I'm gonna leave the strength, the emission at 1, and we have a new setting now in cycles that got added pretty recently. So if you have the latest or one of the latest builds, you should have this sample as lamp, and what that does is it treats the environment texture as a light source, I guess, which is supposed to decrease fireflies and stuff like that. Which it's actually it's supposed to when you don't have, it doesn't render faster, it actually renders a bit slower. So if you would render 100 samples with it, the 100 samples would take longer to calculate than without having this enabled. But the picture at 100 samples is supposed to look a lot cleaner and have less fireflies than the result you would have without having this checked. So yeah, actually I played around with this a little bit, and I figured it actually does exactly what the description said it would do. So in the camera settings, let's enable the limits real quick, and I want to focus on this monkey, which is the original monkey again. So I will enable the DOF and focus on the original monkey and set my aperture size to 0.06. I hope that will be enough. So I loaded in the environment texture now and added the DOF, and I'm going to render view, and 10 samples will take a lot longer now. And you can see the colors, the emission colors from the environment texture and everything else, and our reflective background is not really reflective at all actually, because the roughness at 0.2 is already really high. But I want this to be a mirror, not really a sharp mirror, but I want this to reflect a lot more, so I'm going to lower the roughness to 0.01, and I will have a nice, not sharp, but a nice mirror effect now. And the samples at 10 now, it all looks, of course, it looks a lot more grainy than before. We have a lot more light in our scene, we have a lot more to reflect and stuff. And if we go back to the render settings over here now, I would have to change this to a higher value now to actually have a cleaner result, a lot higher. So the 1000 would probably do for this scene now, but I want to show you the presets here over now. And to refresh this, I enable the check and uncheck the no caustics. So we are at the full global illumination now, which has a lot more bounces, and 128 on all of the light path options. And as you can see, this is a lot more than what direct lighting does. When I change this to direct light, we have a much darker result. Also the caustics are enabled in this now, and usually if I disable the caustics for the full global illumination, it will look something like this. Anyway, we have the diffuse at 0 now, the glossy only at 1, transmission at 2, the bounces only at 8 each, not the max at 128. And I'm not going to go, actually I don't know enough about this, but the bounces, for example, is something like when the light source emits a ray, and the ray gets reflected by the object towards the camera, and the bounces are the bounces between the object and the camera, if I'm not mistaken, or between the light source and the object, for example, and stuff like that gets calculated, and this is the way Cycles renders, I guess. I don't know if that explanation makes any sense, but yeah. Anyway, you would have to play around with these values a lot, but the bigger is not necessarily the better. You can read up on the internet if you want to go really in depth, but I usually like to use one of the default presets here and play around with those. So I'm going to change this to limited global illumination on caustics, with caustics, and you can see we have a pretty bright result, and it's a lot more grainy in the beginning, so we would have to render this a lot, or check put the render value on something a lot higher than it is in the preview. So 1000 would probably give us a nice clean result as well in the end. If I disable the caustics, it goes a lot faster, it's a little bit darker. The same for full global illumination, no caustics, a little bit darker. And now I enable the caustics again, let it render the 10 samples, and it's brighter and more grainy as well. And it takes a little bit longer to calculate also. So if I will change this back now to direct light and enable the caustics. This gives me a little bit of a darker result, and I like this one the most in this case, and it also seems to go the fastest of all the 3 options I have here. and it takes into account zero diffuse. Actually, I don't have one single diffuse texture in all of this shader. It's just velvet, glossy, and glass. So I don't really need the diffuse in this, I guess. And for glossy and transmission, it's very low values, and should go faster with the calculations. And I still have caustics and I have shadows enabled. So I'm going to render this one now on 1000, and this should give us a result similar to what we saw at the beginning. So let me do this real quick. Alright, so this is the final result. It rendered now for 6 minutes and 58 seconds and 1000 path tracing samples, and that was way too much already, because I had a close eye on this while it rendered, and once it passed the 400 mark there was not much improvement in the picture whatsoever. So I probably could have gotten away with like 2 minutes something render time and 400 samples instead of the 1000. Yeah, so that was way overdoing it, and I rendered this in full HD now, and it looks pretty clean to me. Not that grainy at all. So the mirror is as rough as we wanted it to be, I guess, and the ground looks pretty nice and velvet to me as well, and the glass monkeys look pretty cool and are reflecting the environment texture quite nicely, and themselves of course. So everything worked out in the end, I guess, and this was a pretty fast render for me. Well, it was a GPU render. Would I have done this with the CPU, it would have taken ages, I guess, on 1000. Yeah, the 400 are probably more than enough if you want to render the same scene in HD. Change the render here to 400 if you do it on CPU rendering, or whatever works best for you. So to wrap this up, integrator settings, most important when you work with cycles. Lighting in general is very important, as you could see when you work with cycles. The material settings, the roughness value, and the sigma for velvet, the IOR for glass, they all have a huge impact on your final results and on your render time. And yeah, the materials are very important if you work with cycles. The light is very important if you work with cycles, and yeah, the integrator settings, most important when you work with cycles. So those are the points you want to focus on if you want to have a nice and clean result. And if you go into the nodes, into the cycles nodes, let me quickly disable this, and if we go into the cycles nodes, we go into the nodes, we work with different shaders like glossy and diffuse, or glossy and velvet. So we would make a glossy velvet material, and we would need to add a mix shader or an edge shader for that to mix those materials together, and then we have the output to the material surface, and this is mixed at 0.5 now, so we should have equal amounts of velvet and glossy, and this would give us a velvet mirror background plane, I guess. And also have a huge impact on the overall render time, on the overall result, and yeah, stuff like that you need to consider when you work with cycles. So I hope this helped a little bit. If you are working with cycles and you were having trouble with grainy results, grainy pictures, I hope I could help you out a little bit in this tutorial, and I hope you can get to something as clean as this in the end after watching this. Yeah, that's it from me for now. I see you around next time. So bye bye.